Please welcome Mrs. Nancy Giordano.
I get to spend most of my time now traveling around the world talking to business and technology leaders who are trying to change the future of their industries or the future of their organizations, and who often have a lot of power and a lot of resources to be able to make the world a better place. And I would argue none of them have as much potential as you guys do to do that work. So this is like the confluence of everything that I really care about, which is building a better future, thinking about the technological implications on society and on the work you guys are going to do, and being able to talk to the folks who can actually most do something with that information. So thank you guys for letting me be here. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm also inspired so much by this leading in a fractured world theme for the year, because it calls us into action. It isn't one of those themes that you can just sit there and go, wow, that's interesting, right? It's one in which you actually have to step up and commit to doing something for it. There is no sitting on the sidelines as this future takes shape. I'm sorry if I'm reverbing here. You are all in a moment where systems, approaches, philosophies, and increasingly institutions are breaking down. There is no sort of doubt about the things that are shifting. And we don't know which ones are going to emerge, right? New things are going to be taking shape, and we don't know exactly what they're going to look like. So we're in this interesting moment that I call the liminal gap. It's the space between what has existed then and what will exist next, right? Something that we're really familiar with and something that's never been created before. So in that gap, there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of questioning, there's a lot of curiosity, hopefully. There's a lot of opportunity. And that's why I get excited so much about this, because while we say fractured world to some, and people get very nervous about that, right? They find that phrase probably very unsettling. I find it's the people who are very comfortable with the status quo, who potentially are benefiting phenomenally well from that status quo, or people who have no sense of empowerment that they can do something about it, right? People who feel kind of threatened by it and don't know what to do about it. Those are the people who are worried about that phrase. The people who are built for action, which I would argue phenomenally are the people in this room, right, who signed up to be trained for action, find this, I hopefully think, a very, very exciting time. We get to rebuild so many of the things that may not be working for everyone. We get to come up with new solutions. We get to come up with all kinds of interesting ways in order to be able to improve people's lives. I live in Austin, Texas currently. There's a company called Icon that has figured out a way to 3D print a house. You can easily go online. If you guys are taking notes, this is a great one. I'll try and give the notes to Colonel Gray so you guys can look some of these things up. They figured out a way to 3D print a house in less than 24 hours. It originally cost $12,000. Now it's down to $7,000. They're trying to get it down to $4,000. Just think about the implications of that on all kinds of things, right? We can talk about industry, but I also think, what is that kind of like game-changing, radical innovation do for border security, for our sort of peace negotiations, for our rhetoric around what people around the world really need, right? It has like amazingly cascading implications. I also have friends at Microsoft who are working with HoloLens. I don't know if you've guys seen it, but it's kind of like a goggle, a bit like an Oculus. I still think it's a little clunky, but it's very cool. And they're building software, and I Googled my buddy Mike, who runs the thing called The Garage. I'm like, I need an example of something in which people are collaborating around the world to build something. And he sends me the link right away and says, oh, we just launched that software. Right? And it allows you to be able to build things as intricate as an airplane wing with anybody from around the world in 3D. So you all put on your HoloLens, and together you are building something of that kind of magnitude and that kind of importance. They also demoed recently that they, if you put the HoloLens on, can see someone like me speaking in another venue somewhere around the world as a hologram in whatever language that country would be able to receive me in. Right? So maybe I won't be flying around anymore doing this. I'll just be, somehow in my living room giving talks around the world. But imagine, again, what that opens up in terms of capacity to be able to learn, capacity to be able to integrate, be able to have more global conversations with one another. Now, many companies are using artificial intelligence and a domain of that particularly called machine learning and natural language processing to do a whole range of different things, right? But one of the things I find fascinating is that they're analyzing conversations online or, I guess, in real life, and they can tell by the way that we use pronouns how we're feeling about ourselves. There's a guy named Jamie Pennebaker wrote a book called The Secret Life of Pronouns. And after you read that and you go to email him, you are so aware of your use of pronouns. I just said, make sure you take I out of everything you write. But how you use pronouns, how you use emoji, They can figure out, again, how you are feeling about your life, about anxiety, about stress, and even about potential suicide. Like, those are the kinds of exciting things when you think about what we're able to do with data and analyze data and how we can improve people's lives with that. We can look at all the terrible things that could happen, but we can also look at all the really, really great things that can happen. And McKinsey just came out, a big consulting company, just came out with a review of 160 ways in which people are using artificial intelligence to improve the quality of people's lives, AI for good. One of the examples is that we can do vertical farming now, in which we can have robots and AI and hydroponic water solutions, right, able to grow food in a square area that is 390 times more efficient. 390 times more efficient, uses 95% less water, right, because it's stacked up in a vertical environment. Imagine, again, the implications, right, when I'm able to have high-quality food available to many people in a much less expensive way. Suddenly housing comes down and food prices go down. And we imagine then people feeling a little less isolated around things, right? The same thing about how I can use this technology to be able to read x-rays much faster, and I can read them anywhere around the world. I can have a community send x-rays, to any hospital around the world. So now I have access potentially to medical care and medical diagnosis in a much more efficient, much more immediate way with people who have potentially less access to some of these resources. These are the things that get me excited about the future and imagining and wanting to deploy these technologies more and more quickly. In Austin, again, some of you guys may have heard. Who's in the Army? Army, ROTC. All right. I know you're like, I don't know, am I or not? Well, I think it's cool. The Army has opened a Futures Command Center in Austin. It started out with only 12 people. It was an experiment to be able to figure out how to do more partnerships with civilians who are building these technologies, again, in artificial intelligence and in robotics and virtual reality. They're located in the main building where all the tech startups are in Austin. And it's interesting, as I was reading about it yesterday, I wanted to get caught up on it. Again, it went from this little 12-person experiment to apparently now 24,000 people in 15 countries around the world that are part of this initiative. So again, as you think about what that looks like, right, what does the future of your work look like? What are the tools and tasks that are going to be carried out with that? What kind of new mindsets are going to be needed? What kind of training is going to be needed to be able to manage some of those things? I could go on, and in my other world, like at dinner last night, I do talk about these things. I talk about wearables and robotics and drones and the implications of all these technologies. I have spent all my life, really, not all my life, but in the last few years, really focused on these technologies and what they might mean. But with this kind of advance also comes tremendous responsibility. And that's the other thing I think that we need to be focused on. In my world, we often talk about the digital cloud. And one day I was on a panel discussion with several big luminaries at Microsoft, including the guy who headed up cloud computing, who went on and on and on about the digital cloud and how great it will be to be able to store all this data and be able to exchange all this data. It will be the key to be able to do predictive analytics and all this AI stuff that we get excited about. And as Bob Kelly was describing this with so much zeal, I just thought to myself, and I said out loud to 450 people in the room, what is the equivalent of the human cloud? Right? What allows us to level up and be able to ensure that we're using these technologies wisely? Right? What is the equivalent social technologies? And how are we keeping up on that side of things? Right? We're so excited about the technological. What about the social? And when you look at that, there are some gaps that we need to address, and they're starting to become more and more prominent. So this is the little Debbie Downer moment where I will read through the list of things that we all need to kind of think about. The growth of loneliness and anxiety across all age groups. Right? And now actually we're seeing it as more and more of a worldwide epidemic. Violence in our schools, in our neighborhoods, in our homes, and across the world. Income, health, and education disparity or inequality, called bipolarism, right? Where not everyone has access to everything, again, both here and around the world. Dire environmental and ecological damage, potentially devastation. And increasingly, this ability to be able to fake anything and anyone. So I can fake a news story, I can fake a photograph, I can fake a video, but soon we're going to be also able to fake a person. We're going to be able to do an artificial rendering of a human and have them saying things that they didn't actually say, and you will not be able to tell the difference between that person really saying it or not, right, unless you're in the real world with them. But anything digital, you will not be able to make that distinction, which has a huge concern around being able to divide people even further than we currently are. Which lastly brings me to the issue about privacy and inclusion and ethics. These are such critical conversations to be having as these technologies create all kinds of new possibilities, both for good and for exploitation. So, my curious new friends, what does this mean for you? Like, what are the questions that start going through your mind? I'm hoping that you guys are thinking through these things at this moment and wondering to yourself, what will the world of work look like, both inside and outside of the military? What kinds of totally new jobs, or as I describe it, actually roles, will people have in the future? What will be created? What will be augmented? What will be replaced by more efficient machines? And where do we then contribute our thinking and curiosity? Are you thinking about what kind of technologies you want to learn more about? We built the Career Fair for the Future last spring for college and high school kids during South by Southwest because I felt like I was really frustrated that many kids have anxiety about the future, don't understand how these technologies are going to change the jobs, and all the adults get to go to the really cool conference and pay a lot of money to go or go to events that are fueled by alcohol, but teens don't get as much access, and you guys care more than anybody else about that conversation. So we brought the experts to kids, and I call you all kids, even though you're young adults. But we had conversations not just about the future of smart city living and the future of making and building and the future of medicine, well-being, and self, but we also really explored what this means for the future of work. And we had kids on their badges write down not just a career area that they're interested in, but a technology that they want to learn more about. Right? It's really curious. It's important that we start to think about what these technologies are and why they're important in our lives. These are the kinds of questions that I literally think about every day. I build conferences around, I give talks around, I do strategic consulting around. But the question that I often get asked from people is, how do we better prepare youth? How do we better prepare you guys for a future that is so ambiguous, that is changing so quickly, that is so fluid, and has so much both potential and peril, right? So I have come down to kind of 4 things that I think are pretty critical capacities to be able to develop as you move into the future. So I'm just going to kind of run through them with a couple of stories. So I know I stand between y'all and lunch, so just know that I hope that this is also nourishing for you, and I'm going to pull up sort of the mom card right now and say, it's worth paying attention to these things. It'll serve you well. All right, so the first is insatiable curiosity. There is seriously not a business leader or a business meeting from MIT to Harvard to Intel to South by to wherever, any environment that I am in, when we talk about what the future needs, it is curious people. Why? Because a constantly changing future needs a constant learner, right? Somebody who constantly wants to take in new information and finds that a very valuable things to do and actually prioritizes that. And this is not just from the classes that you choose to take. It is from the podcasts that you watch. It's the books that you read. It is the videos that you download. It is everything. It's also the people that you seek out. And when you have an opportunity to be with that person, the questions that you ask that person, right? These are the kinds of things that spark all kinds of new ideas. But the second thing that I think is so really fascinating about curiosity is that it is as unique as your thumbprint is. What you are curious about is uniquely you. Each of us has a very unique thing that we get to think about and that we get to bring to the world. And when you can think about that and really invest time and energy, I will tell you that it is a tremendous value to both you and the planet. The second capacity that I think is really critical for the future is this idea of agency. I don't know if this is a word you guys are familiar with or not, but it's really that sense that you feel that you have confidence and responsibility that you can take action. So the question again is then, how do we build capacity to figure it out, right? I would argue again, using your curiosity to test and to learn things is a critical part of it. Agency is trusting yourself and knowing that you have value and then springing into action. The third up, however, is empathy. That's a word I'm sure that is used a lot this day and age. It's critical that we see things from somebody else's point of view, not just from ours. So it's great to have agency, but it's also great, right, to see things from someone else's point of view, which I find very encouraging because I think empathy is one of those things in which we are often attributing it to women, right? These kind women at the airport who took care of another kind woman who needed some help at the airport. But the fact is, I think that thinking that empathy is, a woman's skill is very, very outdated thinking, and is one of the things that we're questioning as we're moving into this fast-moving future. It's old social conditioning that needs to be considered very differently. It's a capacity that you guys all have. It's what drives smart, human-centric design, is being empathetic to how someone would use that product. It's how you build engaging teams that want to be part of something, right, as opposed to just commanding them. You're really thinking about what that team needs. It fuels innovation. The fourth one is grit. Now, you guys have all signed up to be here, right? Let's talk about perseverance, we talk about resilience. These are incredible things that, again, you guys probably have nailed. Grit is not about avoiding things that are difficult, particularly moments in which you are surprised that you didn't succeed. But it's about having the perseverance to be able to survive it and thrive from it. What do you learn from it? So grit, again, as we describe it as resilience and perseverance, is a big part of what attracted you to VMI. It's a big part of what is being instilled in you. I will just say yes, and remember that you're not alone. Never, ever, no matter what you're facing, are you guys alone. I will add one more quickly, which is integrity. Increasingly, this has become an important part of the conversation, right? It's what we lean on when we're shown in a moment of ethical ambiguity, in which we're increasingly faced again with complex and fracturing world. We know it's not a good idea to build something that potentially, exploits someone's mood at a particular moment and day and time. But if our competitors do it, we'll do it too. Because, okay, you gotta stay competitive. Like, no, right? Or I've sat in meetings in which people said, well, we don't know exactly how our customer is gonna use it, it's up to them. I'm like, no, it's not. If we build this thing, we build an application that when you call a call center, it knows everything about you, when you call to ask about financial advice, and I know how you make financial decisions because I got so much data, right? The idea is not to exploit you, it is to empower you. It is not to stalk you, it is to serve you. And again, I'm saying this now to grown-ups around the world. I'm saying it to you guys too. You'll be faced with more and more of those ethical dilemmas. If you're in any world of comp sci, you've got to write a feature into an app, you'll be asked to think about what the implications of that are. I'm guided by the fact that trust is increasingly the most important thing that a person or an organization or an industry or even a nation can cultivate. Saying, well, again, I think it's a bad idea, but I'm going to do it as a really quick way to erode one of the most important things, which is your own integrity and your own ability to be able to make things happen in the future and can potentially have really devastating and unintended consequences. So I say use that agency, right? Even if you are the only fill-in-the-blank person in the room. I can't tell you how often I'm the only woman on a stage or in a room having some of these conversations. Sometimes you'll be the only person from a certain geographic background, an ethnic background, religious background, an age background. The only person who has that curiosity and that interest in that piece of information. Raise the question. Yes, the world is fracturing. And while that can feel, again, daunting for sure, I believe it also, again, as you have heard me say, is hugely exciting. Because many of the structures and the approaches that we become conditioned into are actually not holding people necessarily all that well. And we get to design them. Breakdowns create breakthroughs. So as you look around at you guys, right, you have the most amazing set of backgrounds, again, in diversity and perspective and ways in which that you are bringing this to this world and to this year. I can't imagine that you are going to be, that anybody can do this better than you can. You're, supported by extraordinary faculty with expertise and open-mindedness. They can encourage you to show the rest of us how to navigate this dynamic new world with wonder and compassion and ingenuity, tenacity, discipline. Like, these are things that are extraordinary to be able to bring. And that's what makes me feel, again, very optimistic about the future, and which is why I love spending time with folks like you.